stopping this guy. You didn't know that. He's one of the great meteorologists of our time. You didn't know that. And he has, after years and years of intensive study, reached the conclusion that climate change is a hoax. Hey, what can we say? But needless to say, everybody else in the world understands, other than Donald, that climate change is not a hoax, that it is the great environmental crisis facing our country and the world. And that if we do not take on the fossil fuel industry and tell them that we are going to leave this planet in a way that's healthy and habitable for future generations, and that means that their short-term profits are not as important as the future of this planet. So I'm getting told to shut up, and I will do that.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to change the theme just a bit, and let's fold in our other communicators today. Seeing that the Supreme Court has taken us in part back to the pre-1965 era, what would each of you do, using the power of your respective offices, to ensure that we don't further inch our way back toward pre-1865? How do each of you see the gutting of Voting Rights Act impacting our democracy in the future? And what will you do to not only protect voting rights in this election, but also enhance access to the ballot? Now, you can close your eyes for a moment and decide you want a piece of that pie or the entire part. Choose. Who would like to speak first? Danny.
I think, first of all, we realize more than ever in this campaign right now for Bernie Sanders as president, how much voting, how important voting is. It's not to diminish all the other things that have happened in the past, in the future, the past, but we understand that there are millions of people who've become excited, enthusiastic about this campaign because of the message. Because of the message. This is not about personality, because of the message. So it is clear that we have to do everything in our power not to be absent when we talk about the Voting Rights Act. And it's been gutted, as you say. We have to do everything in our power as citizens. We have to encourage and let our legislative officers and others know that it is an important part, the essential part of this democracy. And our voice, every single vote counts. So that's the first thing we do.
Well, in San Francisco, we just introduced a ballot measure that will be on in November that is going to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in San Francisco municipal elections. We know the lowest voter turnout is amongst voters between 18 and 30, and 18 is one of the most awkward times to register to vote. Some young people are taking off for college, they're moving out of their house, they're starting a new life, and this is the time that we expect young people to register at a home address and get out to vote. And we know that that doesn't happen. So we should start registering young people at a younger age, at 16 and 17. when many of them are in school and taking civics and U.S. government. How many of us remember civics and U.S. government? Wouldn't it have been amazing to vote when you were 16 years old? And we're starting that here in San Francisco. But we need to do everything that we can to take out any barriers to voting here in this country, because I believe we represent the majority. I really believe that we represent the majority of this country. And if everyone was able to participate and vote, we would have stronger and more progressive leadership here in our country, in our cities, and our state.
Well, let me agree with both Danny and Jane and say this. You know, you stop and you think about all of the blood that has been spilled in this country to make sure. For economic, social, and environmental justice. So I thank Danny for all that he's done. And let me thank somebody I've known for many decades, and that is Bob Reich. Bob now teaches at UCal at Berkeley. But before that, he was the Secretary of Labor under President Clinton. And he was, in my view, because I was in the House back then, he was one of the great secretaries of labor that this country has ever had. He made it clear which side he was on, and he was on the side of working people. When we began this campaign a little over a year ago, the pundits had determined in their never-ending wisdom, never-failing wisdom, that our campaign was going to be a fringe campaign. Yes, Bernie Sanders combs his hair the way a president should. And it's true, he wears $4,000 suits, that's true. Just kidding. $99, I think, is what it was. But despite those presidential attributes, they didn't think we would go very far. Well, a year has come and gone. And up till now, we have won the primaries and caucuses in 20 states in this country. We have won well over 9 million votes. And if you promise not to tell Secretary Clinton, she's getting very nervous lately. And I don't want to add to her anxiety. So if you promise not to tell her, we're going to win here in California on June 7th. And if there is a large voter turnout, we are going to capture a very good majority of the 475 pledged delegates that are up on June 7th. And I think we're going to do well in South Dakota on that day, in North Dakota, in Montana, in New Mexico, in New Jersey as well. And if we can win here in California, our largest state, one of our most progressive states, we will go into the Democratic Convention with a great deal of momentum, and we will come out with the nomination. And let me mention something to you that some of you may not know, is that in virtually every national poll and every state poll conducted over the last several months, we defeat Donald Trump. And often by big margins. Here in California, there was a poll the other day. We were ahead of him by 17 points. And the point that I will be making to the Democratic Convention is that in virtually every state and national poll, we do much better against Trump than does Secretary Clinton. So if the Democrats want a campaign that will make certain that the disaster of Donald Trump will not become president, we are that campaign. And we are that campaign not just because polls show us winning. More importantly, it is because of you and millions of other Americans who are now prepared to stand up, fight back, and get engaged in the political process. Here is a truism of American politics today. When people are demoralized, when they give up on politics, Republicans win because we have low voter turnouts. That's what happened 2 years ago. But when people are prepared to stand up and fight back, when they are prepared to make real change in this country, they will come out to vote and vote in large numbers, and that is when progressives and Democrats win. That is what this campaign is about. And let me mention something else to you which really makes me feel absolutely terrific, and that is that that's true too. That was an inside joke. The rest of you didn't hear that. And that is that in primary after primary and caucus after caucus, we win often overwhelmingly the votes of young people. And by that, I mean not just the 20-year-olds, we thank them for their support, but people 45 years of age or younger. We don't get intimidated easily. And what is extraordinary about this process so far and winning the votes of young people, it tells me that our message of social justice, economic justice, racial justice, environmental justice, That is the message for the future of our country. Our message in this campaign is to bring people together. Black and white and Latino and Asian American and Native American. We will never allow the Trumps of the world to divide us up. And this campaign is going to win because we're doing something very unusual in contemporary American politics. We're telling the truth. And the truth is that today we have a corrupt campaign finance system, which, as Bob Rice just told us, is undermining American democracy. Democracy is not a complicated concept. It is one person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections. When a handful of billionaires buy elections to elect those who will represent the wealthy and the powerful, that's not democracy. That is oligarchy. We will not accept it. But it's not just the corrupt campaign finance system that we are going to end. It is a rigged economy. A rigged economy is when today the top 0.1% now own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. A rigged economy is when the 20 wealthiest people own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. A rigged economy is when we see a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires, and yet we have single moms in California making $11 an hour, unable to provide for their kids. A rigged economy is when we have veterans who put their lives on the line for this country sleeping out on the streets of San Francisco. A rigged economy is when CEOs make $40 or $50 million a year and then take away the health care benefits of their workers, their pensions, and lower their wages. That's a rigged economy. A rigged economy is when large corporations making billions a year shut down factories in America and move to low-wage countries, throwing millions of Americans out on the street. Together, we are going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. This campaign is also going to end a broken criminal justice system. Every person in America should be extremely embarrassed by the fact that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. It is not acceptable to me, and I think to you, that in America today We have 2.2 million people behind bars, and we're spending $80 billion a year to lock them up. In inner cities and in rural communities, we have unemployment rates for young people of 30, 40, 50%. And when kids are hanging out on street corners without jobs and not being in school, bad things can happen. That is why I believe we should invest in our young people in jobs and education. Not in jails and incarceration. I want and you want our kids to be in school or working at meaningful jobs, not rotting in jail cells. And when we talk about criminal justice, it is important to look at local police departments all over this country. I was a mayor in Burlington, Vermont for 8 years. I worked with the police there, and I've worked with police all over this country, and the vast majority of police officers are honest, hardworking, and have a very difficult job to do. But like any other public official, when a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. We need to demilitarize local police departments. We need to make police departments reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. We need to end corporate ownership of prisons and detention centers. We need to change law enforcement culture all over this country so that the use of lethal force is the last response, not the first response. We need to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Over the last 30 years, millions of Americans have received police records for possession of marijuana. And if you are a 19-year-old kid applying for a job, having that police record does not help you get that job. Right now, under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug right next to the killer drug heroin. If elected president, we will take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. All of you know that the legalization of marijuana is a state issue, not a federal issue. But I believe from a criminal justice point of view, just from that alone, if I were a citizen of California, this campaign also understands that when we talk about drugs, we all have got to appreciate we have a major crisis in this country in terms of opiate and heroin addiction. This is a major issue that we cannot afford to ignore because every single day people are dying of drug overdoses. In my view, we have got to be smart in how we deal with substance abuse and addiction. And that means we have to treat that problem not as a criminal issue, but as a health issue. And that means we need a revolution in mental health treatment in this country. When people are in mental health crisis, they need treatment now, not 6 months from now. And by the way, that is not only dealing with addiction and substance abuse. We got thousands of people in America, sad to say, who are walking our streets who are suicidal and some are homicidal. They need treatment today, not next year. This campaign is listening to ordinary Americans, not wealthy campaign contributors. And I am extremely proud to tell you that ours is the only campaign this year for president that does not want a super PAC. We do not represent Wall Street or the billionaire class. We don't want their money. But what we have done in this campaign is almost unimaginable, and it is unprecedented. We have received almost 8 million individual campaign contributions. Anyone know the average contribution? $27. If I must say myself, that is pretty damn good. Because what we have shown is we can run a winning national campaign without asking billionaires for campaign contributions. Now, my Democratic opponent, Secretary Clinton, she has chosen another way to raise funds. She has not one, but a number of super PACs which have collected tens of millions of dollars from Wall Street and other special interests. Now, I don't know how somebody can say they're going to stand up to Wall Street when they take Wall Street's money. Doesn't make sense to me. This campaign is listening to workers. And I am proud to see the nurses union here today. And I'm proud to see some CWA members here today. And many of the other unions who have supported our campaign. And what workers all over this country are saying is they can't make it on 10, 11 bucks an hour. They can't make it on the $12 an hour that Secretary Clinton wants to see. Workers in this country want and deserve 15 bucks an hour. and the right to form a union. This campaign is listening to senior citizens and disabled vets. Republicans want to cut Social Security. We're not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security. This campaign is listening to women. And women are telling me and America they are tired of working for 79 cents on the dollar. They want the whole damn dollar, and they're right. And I know that every man here today will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity. And women are also telling me that they are tired of hearing about Republican family values. Because we all know what Republican family values mean, and that is that under the Republican doctrine, no woman here in California or in this country should have the right to control her own body. We disagree. And under Republican family values, they are telling us that our gay brothers and sisters should not have the right to marry. We disagree. Jane and I have been married for 28 years. That's true. I don't know how she has stood me for 28 years, but she has, and I appreciate that. And we believe in family values very strongly, but our family values very, very different than Republican family values. And our values are about ending the international disgrace in which the United States is the only major country on earth not to guarantee paid family and medical leave. This campaign is listening to young people. And what young people are asking me is, how does it happen that after they do the right thing, they go out and get the best education they can? How does it happen they end $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt? Think about it for a second. That is absolutely crazy. And if you think outside of the box, you say this to yourself, wait a second. We live in a highly competitive global economy. We need the best educated workforce in the world. We have got to make sure that all of our people, young people, people in a changing economy, get the educations they need to do the jobs that are out there. Why in God's name are we punishing people for getting an education? We should be rewarding people, not punishing them. Now, I grew up in a family, didn't have a lot of money. My parents never went to college. And that is the situation with millions of kids today. I want to see in America every child, regardless of the income of his or her family, If that kid does well in school, if that kid takes school seriously, I want to see that child being able to get a college education regardless of the income of that family. And that is why we are going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. That is what America is supposed to be about. That you can get all of the education you need regardless of the income of your family. How many people here are carrying student debt right now? Whoa, whoa. That's a lot of people. For those millions of people who are carrying student debt, what we will fight for is to allow those people to refinance their loans at the lowest interest rates they can find. Now, my opponents and the media and everybody else say, well, Bernie, you know, you're a nice guy. You're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. You're going to substantially lower student debt. How are you going to pay for it? And let me tell you exactly how we're going to pay for it. Now, the media forgets to tell you this. I don't know why, but corporate media somehow forgets to tell you that over the last 25 years, there has been a massive redistribution of wealth in this country from the middle class to the top 1/10 of 1%. Well, for a start, we're going to redistribute that wealth back down to working families. And second of all of you know that after the greed and the recklessness and the illegal behavior of Wall Street helped destroy our economy, leading to millions of Americans losing their jobs, their homes, and their life savings, against my vote, Congress bailed them out. Well, I think it's time for a tax on Wall Street speculation. The middle class bailed out Wall Street. Now it's Wall Street's time to help the middle class of this country. Oh, and by the way, while we're on Wall Street, I think it is time to break up the major banks in this country. This campaign is listening to the Latino community. There are 11 million undocumented people in this country, and every single day, I just met with farm workers yesterday, every single day, undocumented people are being exploited, they're being cheated, because when you don't have any legal rights, you can't stand up and take on your employer. The time is long overdue for us to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. And if Congress, if the Republicans don't do yes, we can. And if the Republicans don't do their job and repair a broken immigration system, I will use the executive powers of the White House to do all that I can. We have got to end the current deportation policies. Our immigration policy is to unite families, not to divide them. This campaign is listening to the African American community. I have been all over this country in this campaign. I've been to Flint, Michigan, where I've talked to parents whose children were poisoned by lead in the water. I've been to Detroit, Michigan, where the public school system there is now on the verge of fiscal collapse. I've been to Baltimore, Maryland, where tens of thousands of people are addicted to heroin and can't find the treatment to get off their addiction. I have been to inner cities where there are no grocery stores, where there are no bank branches, so if you want to cash a check, you go to a payday lender and pay some usurious interest rates. And what the African American community is asking me is, how does it happen that we could invest trillions of dollars fighting a war in Iraq we never should have gotten into? But somehow we don't have the funds to rebuild the inner cities of this country. Together, we are going to radically change our national priorities. No more wars that should not be fought. No more tax breaks for billionaires and profitable corporations. But yes to investing in inner cities and in low-wage, poverty-stricken rural communities. And this campaign is listening to a group of people whose pain is almost never heard from, and that is the Native American people. Everybody here knows that from before the time this country became a country, the Native American people were cheated, were lied to, and treaties they negotiated were abrogated. And the truth is that our culture today owes the Native American people a debt of gratitude that we can never fully repay. They have taught us an enormous amount, but perhaps the most profound lesson that they have tried to teach us is that as human beings, we are part of nature. We must live with nature. And that if we continue to destroy nature, we are destroying the human species. And yet, despite all they have done for our country, on Native American reservations and their communities all over this country, poverty and unemployment are sky high. Healthcare and educational opportunity are totally inadequate. If I am elected president, we will change. When I am elected president. We will change the federal government's relationship to the Native American community. Now, I am a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment. And in that capacity, I have talked to scientists all over this country and all over the world. Now, I recognize that all of the scientists who have studied this issue for decades are not quite as smart as Donald Trump. I got that. Because I know that Donald Trump, after years of intensive study, has concluded that there is no drought in California. And Donald Trump, even after more years of study, has concluded that climate change is a hoax. See, now, I was not shocked to hear that Trump thought climate change was a hoax. That's what most Republicans think. Pretty pathetic, but that is what they think. But what I was surprised about is he thought it was a hoax perpetrated on our country by the Chinese. See, and I thought he would have believed it was a hoax created by the Mexicans or the Muslims. Why the Chinese, I don't know. But in any case, despite Donald Trump's profound thought on this issue, what virtually the entire scientific community understands is climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change is already causing devastating problems, as you well know, in California, here in this country, and all over the world. And here is what is really scary, and we had better listen to them. What the scientists are also telling us, if we do not get our act together boldly and in a very short future, what we're going to be seeing is more drought, more flooding, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean, more rising sea levels, and more international conflict as people around the world fight over limited natural resources. We have a moral responsibility as custodians of this planet to make sure that we leave this planet in a way that is healthy for our kids. And what that means is having the guts to take on the fossil fuel industry, to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, and to tell the oil and coal companies that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet. There is one country in the industrialized world, one country, that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. And you are living in that country. In my view, the Affordable Care Act has done a lot of important things, but we need to do more. Not acceptable that 28 million people today have no health insurance, that many of you are underinsured with high deductibles and high copayments, that every one of us is getting ripped off by the greed of the pharmaceutical industry that charges us by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. In my view, Health care is a right of all people, not a privilege. And I am very proud to stand with National Nurses United and with nurses and doctors all over this country who know that we need a Medicare for all single-payer program. And by the way, when we do that, we're going to save the average middle-class family thousands of dollars a year on their health care costs. Brothers and sisters, I think everybody here knows a very profound lesson of American history. And that lesson is that real change never takes place from the top on down. It is always from the bottom on up. A 100+ years ago, when workers were forced to work 7 days a week and children were working in factories, the working class of this country stood up and they said, we will form trade unions to protect the rights of workers. And we thank the trade union movement for helping to create the modern American middle class. 150 years ago, amidst the abomination of slavery, African Americans and their allies fought back and they looked to the future. And they said that the day will come in this country when we will rid ourselves of racism and bigotry and segregation. And we will never know how many people died in that struggle, went to jail, were beaten. But we do know that over the years, millions of people stood up and fought back to end racism in this country. The children often do not know this, but 100 years ago in this country, women did not have the right to vote. They could not get the education or the jobs they wanted. But women stood up, fought back. Some went on hunger strikes, some died, some went to jail. But they said, women in America will not be second-class citizens. If we were here in Oakland 10 years ago and somebody jumped up and said, Bernie, you know, I think gay marriage will be legal in every state in this country by 2015. Person next to him would have said, you're crazy. There's too much homophobia, there's too much bigotry, too much hatred, it cannot happen. But the gay community and their straight allies stood up, fought back. And they said loudly and proudly that in America, people should have the right to love whoever they wanted, regardless of their gender. And if we were here 5 years ago, no time at all, somebody jumped up and she said, you know, I think that by in a few years, we're going to raise the minimum wage from the starvation $7.25 minimum wage to $15 an hour. Everybody there would have thought she was crazy. People would have said, you want to go from $7.25 to $15? You want to more than double the minimum wage? You're too radical. You're an extremist. Can't happen. But you know what did happen? Workers in the fast food industry, in McDonald's, in Burger King, they went out on strike, and they told the world that they can't make it on 7.25. And then a few years ago, in Seattle, they raised the minimum wage $15 an hour. San Francisco, Los Angeles, 15. California, New York, $15 an hour. What is my point? My point is that what seems impossible today, in fact, happens when millions of people demand that it happens. Please do not tell me that the United States cannot do what every other major country does and guarantee health care to all people as a right. Don't tell me that the United States cannot do what Germany and Scandinavia does today, provide free tuition at their colleges and universities. Don't tell me that the United States is has to be the only major country not to guarantee paid family and medical leave. Don't tell me we have to have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country, or that our infrastructure, our roads and our bridges have to continue to collapse. Don't tell me that we need to continue having a corrupt campaign finance system or a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. The truth is that if we stand together, we can address all of these issues. What our goal is and what we have to do is create a government that works for all of us, not just the 1%. On June 7th, a week from tomorrow, there's going to be an extraordinarily important Democratic primary here in California. It will be the most important primary in the whole nominating process because you have 475 delegates for grabs. If there is a large voter turnout, we will win and win big. So on June 7th, let us together create the largest voter turnout in Democratic primary history in California. And let this great state, one of the most progressive states in the country, go on record as saying, yes, let's go forward with the political revolution. Thank you all.
Literally the day after, you got attorney generals and governors working overtime trying to make it harder for people to vote. That is beyond a disgrace. And let me tell you, if elected president, the Attorney General of the United States will be working and taking on every one of those Republican states who are trying to suppress the vote. You know, what a democracy is about, we can have different points of view. That's called democracy. But don't deny people the right to vote because they're people of color, because they're poor, because they're young, because they are old. In my view, we should make voting rights as simple as possible. If you are of the voting age today of 18, you are registered to vote. End of discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. Representatives Barbara Lee and James Clyburn. We can hear a shout out for one of our home girls. This is the home church of Congresswoman Barbara Lee. She and James Clyburn co-authored Bill H.R. 5571 titled 10-20-30 to increase the allocation of funding for in-counties with persistent poverty. Currently, 45 million people live in poverty. 28% are African Americans, and 38% are African American children. Will you support this bill, Senator Saunders? And what would your administration do that has not already been done to address the issue of childhood poverty?
We absolutely support that legislation, and I have spent the last many decades of my life fighting against the outrageous level of childhood poverty that we have right now. Look, what we have got to do, and the point that Jane made a moment ago, and I want to reinforce this, everything that we are talking about today is what the majority of the American people believe. We are not the fringe. Donald Trump and his friends are the fringe. Okay? Who believes, I mean, what sane person in America believes that in the richest country in the world, 22% of our kids should be living in poverty, and for the African American and Latino communities, those numbers are much, much higher. So what has to be done, and by the way, if you follow what goes on in Congress, our Republican colleagues want to make it much worse. They want to cut nutrition programs, cut child care programs, cut education and Pell Grant programs. They want to do exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. And in my view, if we're going to deal with childhood poverty, if we're going to deal with poverty in general, that means fundamentally changing our national priorities. And that means, among many other things, no more wars like the war in Iraq that we never should have gotten into. You know, how does it happen that we have trillions of dollars, trillions, to spend on a war in Iraq and in Afghanistan, but apparently we don't have the money to rebuild inner cities in America, create decent schools, decent health care, affordable housing? How could it be that in America in the year 2016, in Flint, Michigan, children are poisoned by the water that they drink? So we need a fundamental change of priorities, and that means that the billionaire class will learn they are not going to get it all, that we are going to focus on low-income inner cities in this country, as well as many rural communities that are hurting as well. We've got to change our national priorities.
I'm going to stand as well. When I was a community organizer, I worked with young people in San Francisco, and at the time, I actually never thought I would run for office. But when I was an organizer, I learned that one of the most important things that elected officials do, whether they serve on your school board, your city council, in Congress, is they determine how our dollars are spent and invested back into our community. They determine how much goes into our streets, into our classrooms for teacher pay, into housing, into prisons, into police. They decide which neighborhoods, which communities, which state. The budget is more than a series of line items and dollar signs. It is a statement of our values and our priorities. And here in this country, we used to not have homelessness as an urban phenomenon. Homelessness did not always exist in cities across this country. It emerged in the 1980s, and it happened to emerge, and it dovetailed exactly with when President Reagan at the time started cutting funding to HUD, to public housing. We used to have more public housing units than people on the wait list in the 60s and 70s. And in fact, if you became homeless, and I talked to social workers during this time, you would often get housed within a week. And when they started cutting funding to HUD, and they cut it by 50% over several administrations, homelessness began to emerge as an urban phenomenon in cities across the country. And now the fastest growing demographic of the homeless count in San Francisco, the city that I represent, in New York City, in Los Angeles, is families. It is single mothers with children under 6 years old, and this is a moral travesty for our cities and for our country. And that is why I'm supporting Senator Sanders, because housing is not a privilege. In the city that I represent, housing is a privilege. Housing is not a privilege, it is a right.
I certainly don't want to reemphasize what our new state senator, Jane Kim, our next president, has emphasized. But let me commend this church, which against all odds located in this community, and then began to do the work, continue to do the work, from the moment it became the home for the Breakfast for Children for the Black Panther Party. And ever since there, I was at a graduation recently, at a graduation of young men and women who will be trained in the trades for the new technology around solar energy. Their graduation, they'll do their part, but what they're saying is that we need help. And I believe and I know that we have these two as our representatives. They're going to get the help they need.
Thank you, each of you. We have two short questions for you from the dais, and then we're going to take a couple of questions from the floor. Senator, I can't even think of you as senator now. Bernie. Senator Bernie. Okay, all right. The Affordable Care Act has allowed 20 million Americans to gain health insurance, including many in marginalized populations throughout the U.S. Yet even with these improvements, 28 million Americans still have no health insurance, and millions more are underinsured. What would a Bernie Sanders presidency look like? How would you strengthen and improve this legislation? That is a brief answer.
Okay. I am a member of the committee that helped write the Affordable Care Act. I voted for the Affordable Care Act. But what you have to acknowledge is the Affordable Care Act is an important step forward, but we have yet a long, long way to go in terms of health care. As you've just heard, 28 million, no health insurance, even more underinsured, and every day we're getting ripped off by the greed of the pharmaceutical industry that charges us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. All right, the brief answer to your question is that the United States should do what every other major country on earth does, guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child as a right.
And the way to do that, in my view, is through a Medicare for all single-payer program.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Another brief question. Describe how your economic plan provides for a reinvestment in distressed neighborhoods, and also how do we assist those who have yet to experience the economic recovery in their lives and in their communities. No doubt as you drove through here, you saw the blight. You saw the empty lots.
I have seen those empty lots and the abandoned housing and the boarded up storefronts all over this country. Don't think that Oakland is alone. And it is totally unnecessary and unacceptable. All right, we have, first point that we have to make is that when you read the papers once a month, they say that unemployment is 5% nationally. Does anybody really believe that? You're right. That's the official unemployment. Then there's another government report that talks about real unemployment, including people who have given up looking for work and people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. Add that together, real unemployment is close to 10%, and in many communities around this country, it is much higher than that. So what do? What we do is understand that we need a massive federal jobs program to put our people back to work. How do you do it? Well, it's not hard. Number one, as a nation, we should be hiring teachers and child care workers, not firing them. Number two, all of you know that our infrastructure, a fancy word for roads and bridges and water systems and wastewater plants and levees and dams and rails, are in massive disrepair all over this country. We rebuild our infrastructure in the way I think we should. We create 13 million good-paying jobs. Building the affordable housing that we need. Makes sense to me to put people to work, building affordable housing, rebuilding wastewater systems. You know, I was just up in the Central Valley. I didn't know this, to be honest with you. You got thousands of people there who turn on their water faucet, they can't drink the water because the pesticides in the water. All right? We have got to invest to make sure that everybody in America has clean drinking water, that we have the state-of-the-art rail system. And when we do that, we improve life in America and we create 13 million jobs. Last point, we should not be giving any more tax breaks to large corporations. We should be working with small and medium-sized businesses, especially if we're going to deal with youth unemployment, African-American businesses, Latino businesses. We're going to put those kids to work.
Senator Sanders, before you sit, Senator Sanders, there is an issue of the transport of coal, other pollutants that are currently being routed through the African-American and the impoverished communities and neighborhoods. How do you weigh in on that?
Well, I weigh on it in two ways. Right now, as I think everybody here knows, in low-income communities, in African-American communities, there is a heck of a lot of pollution going on. I was in the Bronx a number of months ago, and somebody, I can't remember the exact number, I don't want to misspeak here, but the number of children dealing with asthma. You got that here as well? All right. Right here in this community? Okay. It was off the charts, unbelievable. And you combine that with lack of good health care access, you got some serious problems. So the answer is twofold. I have opposed all of these pipelines, the Keystone Pipeline and the other pipelines. because we have got to transform our energy system away from coal and oil into energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Now, truth is that under President Obama, we have made some progress in moving to sustainable energy. But we have the potential to do much, much more. We can have rooftops all over this country and in states like California, where you get a lot of sun, that can generate an unbelievable amount of electricity. That's what we should be doing.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Soon to be Senator Kim. We all know that education has been said to be the great equalizer. However, with the rising cost of college tuition and rising debt associated with students' loans, what are concrete ways we can address college affordability?
So I talked a little bit about the budget, and so I want to talk about the California state budget for a moment, since this is where we are. The California state budget over the last 30 years has actually roughly stayed proportionately the same. 40% K through 12 community college, 30% health and human services, and the final 30% goes to everything else. Now, there are two line items that changed significantly over the last 30 years, and you can probably guess the first one. Prisons. That's right. Used to be 3% of our budget, went up 6% over the last 30 years. There's only one other line item that changed that significantly, and that was higher education. Our Cal State and UC system, it went down exactly 6%, from 18 to 12% of our California state budget. So when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, it is real. When we talk about who we have decided to value, the system that California has decided to invest in, that our young people will go into, we built 23 state prisons over the last 30 years. We built only 3 CSUs and 1 UC. We used to cover 80% of your tuition if you went to a UC or CSU 30 years ago. Today that has dropped down to under 30%. So I'm starting here locally in San Francisco. I introduced a proposal to make City College free for all San Francisco residents. We know that community college has long been the institution that has allowed many of our citizens to rise to the middle class. In fact, in San Francisco alone, if you are a City College graduate, on average you earn $11,000 more than your counterparts with only a high school education. And I'm going to do this with the proposal that I introduced 2 weeks ago that will do a slight modest increase on housing and buildings of $5 million and above, and it will generate $29 million a year in the county of San Francisco. To make City College free today is $13 million. We are going to make City College free in November. I hope that I will have your support. If we do this, we will be the first city in the nation to make City College free for all of our residents, regardless of income or age or any type of prerequisite. And we will do that by taxing our highest, wealthiest homes in our city. Thank you.
Senator, did she say it all? Did she say it all?
You said it all.
We have some volunteers here in the audience who've been identifying a couple of questions for me.
Bernie, end of abuse.
But Bernie, Senator Bernie, it is undeniable that you have been in the trenches fighting for civil and human rights for decades. African Americans and Latinos, irrespective of class, irrespective of economic status, education, personal or professional achievement, live in constant fear for the well-being of their children and loved ones. Though they live in America and pay their fair share of taxes, mothers afraid to let their sons grow up, go out, run in the evenings for fear their running might be misinterpreted. Fearful, setting curfews unrealistic for young adults. How can we change this? And I think we have someone from the floor who wanted to speak to that very issue. Someone who was a member of the Hunger for Justice Frisco 5, who recently participated in the hunger strike, calling for Mayor Ed Lee to fire San Francisco Chief Greg Suhr in light of the unexplainable, unjustifiable police shootings of black and brown individuals such as Alex Nieto, Louis Gongora, Mario Woods, and Amilcar Perez Lopez. What is your question?
My question, so my name is Ike, I'm with the Frisco 5, and there's other members here as well. I'm usually very outspoken, but I'm nervous because it's been a long time. I've been wanting to meet you forever. So I'm just excited just to be in the same room as you, Bernie. So I totally feel the burn. I lost my voice a little bit after the Warriors game, so. So we're gonna do it tonight too, baby! Woo! Okay, all right, so. Let me get to my question. I'm sorry. So, Mr. Future President of the U.S., how would you handle the nationwide militarization of police and address those police killing unarmed minorities? And what is your vision for much-needed police-wide police reform?
Thank you. Great question, an enormously important question, because as you indicated, what kind of country are we where mothers are afraid to let their kids go out and play? I mean, that's... All right, so what do we do? First start, let me start off easy, and by saying that, in my view, that any person in America who is killed while being apprehended by the police or dies in police custody, that should immediately and automatically initiate a Department of Justice investigation. So the word goes out, it is not going to be just local police departments investigated. It will be an aggressive Department of Justice and an aggressive Attorney General. That's number one. Number two, unlike many other countries, here in law enforcement in America, we do not have the culture which says that lethal force, shooting somebody, is the last response, not the first response. You know? I am not going to deny, and you're not going to deny, that sometimes we do want police to use lethal force in a tragic situation. Somebody busts in with a machine gun, yeah, you want that person taken down. But too often the response is lethal force rather than coming up with other ways to deal with the problem. Third point you raised. There are communities in America where the police look like occupying armies. You know, you think you're in Iraq, you're invading a community. The goal is, and there are some police departments in America who do this, the goal is not for a police department to be intimidating the local populace. The goal is to have a police department which is part of the community, which is respected, which is helpful. You know, we want a police department where people feel comfortable going to a police officer and saying, there's some drug dealing going on over there. We want the police to be part of the community, not a force that terrifies and frightens the people in the community. Further, what we have got to do, and this is tough, it's not tough stuff, but it's something we got to focus on, is we want local police departments to reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. You know? You got a black community, it is appropriate to expect that a majority of the officers will be African American. You got a Latino community, same thing. All right, and the other thing, which is related, everything's related to everything else. I learned this, I didn't know this before I began to run for president. Turns out that over the last 30 years, millions of people have received police records for possession of marijuana. It turns out, according to studies, blacks and whites do marijuana at about equal rates. But you know what? Blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested than whites for marijuana. Turns out that you got a federal Controlled Substance Act that lists marijuana as a Schedule I drug, right next to heroin. All right, my view is we take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. Because if a police officer stops your car and there's marijuana in there, you got not just the marijuana issue, but other things occur as well. All right? So I think, by the way, if I lived here in California, there's going to be an item on your November ballot to legalize marijuana. I would support it. I think it's from a criminal justice point of view. Last point. There has got to be a lot of work done in fighting racism within police departments. That's no secret. A lot of work and a lot of training has got to be done. All right, those are some of the things that I would do as president.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have a question over here.
Good afternoon, Senator Sanders, and thank you all for being here today. So in Oakland, in East Oakland, my name is Mia Yoshitani. I'm with the Asian Pacific Environmental Network Action. APEN is an environmental justice organization. We organize low-income Asian, Pacific Islander, immigrant refugee communities. Just like a lot of our environmental justice and social justice, economic justice allies who are here in this room, we organize at the intersection of racism, poverty, and pollution. So I have a question, and I want to bring some of the issues together that you've been talking about today. I appreciate your commitment to working families and to addressing poverty and to addressing systemic racism and white supremacy, and I appreciate your commitment to addressing climate change. But how will you ensure that climate change is actually addressed equitably? How will you ensure that the people who have been at the brunt of the economic crisis and the environmental crisis, these are the same communities, how will you ensure that these communities are at the front of the line for the benefits of climate change, and how we address both the health concerns and the economic needs of our communities? Thank you.
I have introduced the most comprehensive climate change legislation in the history of the United States Senate. And it in fact addresses the issues that you are raising. There is an understanding that the people in community after community who are bearing the brunt of climate change, or toxicity in the water, or bad air, are very often in low-income and minority communities. They do not build coal-burning plants in the suburbs and in wealthy communities. That does not take place. So I think 2 things. Number 1 is, and I have to say this over and over again, people criticize me for saying this, but I think that climate change is one of the great global crises that we face. And if we do not get our act together, the destruction that it will cause in terms of drought, you're seeing it here in California already, in terms of floods, extreme weather disturbances, acidification of the ocean, we're destroying our oceans. In terms of rising sea levels, you know, Miami may be, you know, don't buy real estate on Miami Beach. It may not be there if present trends continue. Right? These are the realities that face this country. And it's like, you know, if we were attacked by some foreign power, everybody would stand up and say, oh, we got a war going on. What are we going to do about it? We are being attacked by climate change. And we need to act in the same aggressiveness. So to answer your question, nobody you know will take a more aggressive and bold action. I have one of the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself is I'm calling for a tax on carbon. All right? But you got to do that. And in that legislation, when we raise a substantial sums of money, we do pay attention to the aggrieved communities, and we pay attention to those communities where workers are involved in fossil fuels and are going to lose their jobs. We've got to try to help them as well. So we do that in our legislation.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. We had another question. Yes.
Hello, Senator Sanders. I'm Mason Reese of the Mentoring Project. I have overheard teachers talking about their financial problems, and I was wondering what you will do to ensure that my teachers get
You're doing great. Don't worry, you're doing great.
suitable pay and help retain teaching talent in public schools.
Yes!
Thank you for that question. Great job. You know, what this campaign is about, maybe most significantly, is not just dealing with this or that issue, whether it's education or climate change. It is demanding that the American people think outside of the box. Think outside of the options that the corporate media gives us or that Congress talks about. You know, Congress is having great debates. Do we cut food stamps or do you cut education? I don't know. Puffish, what do you think? That is not the options that we have to deal with. So what this young man is asking us, think about, here's a good question, think about how crazy it is. Everybody here knows, no one debates it, that as human beings, education is inherent in who we are. I want you to be studying and thinking and learning until the day you die 100 years from now, all right? But second of all, from a narrower perspective, we live in a competitive global economy, okay? Other countries understand they're not going to do well unless they invest in their children and invest in education. How do you compete if you don't do that? The idea that teachers are not respected, the idea that education is not respected in this country, the idea that we do not have the best public educational system in the world is unacceptable to me. I want our brightest, you know what, I don't know, are you interested in education? I would hope that when you graduate college or graduate school, you give thought to becoming a teacher. We need great teachers all over this country. Who should be well paid, and we have to respect education. I know I'm going to lose a lot of votes here tonight. I know there's a Game 7 here. And I know everybody here, you know, loves basketball. But you know what? You want my humble opinion? Teachers are more important than basketball players.
We thank you, Bernie Sanders. We thank you, Senator Bernie. It's not over. It's not over.
Okay.
told us we're on his block. And so we got a fire going here, and he doesn't want to put it out. What's another question?
Yes, this is our final question. But before that, we will be having a women's roundtable, the campaign, on Thursday at 6 p.m. at the Old Stop, so we can go on and talk more in depth about women's issues and how Senator Sanders is the best candidate for our issue. And here's the last question for you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, thank you for coming to the Oakland. I love Oakland. The Bay Area was one of the worst hit regions during the 2008 financial crisis, with the erasure of brown and black wealth in the terms of foreclosure and losing homes. I myself, my rent went up $300 a month, and I had to leave the Bay Area because I could not afford my place anymore. So what I want to know from you is, how will you ensure affordable housing for everyone, and how will you help restore black and brown wealth in the form of home ownership?
When I was in the House of Representatives, before I was in the Senate, I was a member of the House Financial Services Committee. I fought vigorously against Republicans, against Alan Greenspan, against Democrats, against President Clinton, who thought it was a brilliant idea to deregulate Wall Street and let these people do what they want to do. They spent billions of dollars in lobbying and campaign contributions to do that. They did it, and we all know what happened. So I'll answer your question in a few ways. Number one, we have to recognize, and I know not everybody may agree with me, but in my view, the business model of Wall Street is fraud. Okay? What they did was not an aberration. It's not that, you know, they're pretty honest guys, they made a mistake, that happens. That is not what they are. Over the last couple of years, just a couple of months ago, Goldman Sachs reached a settlement with the United States government for $5 billion, basically acknowledging they were selling worthless packages of subprime mortgage loans, which led to the economic collapse. So issue number one, if I'm elected president, that will not happen again, because we're going to break up these huge financial institutions. Number two, if what is the case, these financial institutions caused this economic collapse, which resulted, by the way, in millions of people losing their jobs, losing their homes, and in some cases losing their life savings, these people on Wall Street have got to be held accountable. And that means significantly more money than is currently being worked on has got to go into those communities and those individuals who are hurt by the illegal behavior of Wall Street. Third point, as we discussed earlier, we have a terrible crisis. And I know it's particularly acute here in California, but it's true all over this country, in low-income affordable housing. Now, if you check the record, in my city of Burlington, we started the first municipally funded community, community housing trust fund, which is how it actually spread all over the country. But second of all, working with Barbara Lee, a local representative, many years ago, we passed a low-income housing bill, which has just finally begun to be funded by the Obama administration to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. I think what we have heard tonight is that there once was a time in America, Jane made that point, where low-income people actually had access to affordable housing. By and large, that is not the case. We are seeing people paying 40, 50, 60% of limited incomes on housing. That is totally absurd. So we're going to put people to work building affordable housing. That's right.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. We're going to wrap it up in just a few minutes, but before, I'm sorry?
Immigration.
Immigration. Immigration. We're on your clock. With the high issue of unemployment being prevalent in communities of color, in addition to conservative rhetoric and immigration being a leading cause of this, how do you reconcile that charge that it's all due to immigration? And how do you plan to address rising tensions and race relations among communities of color?
Okay. First thought, we have 11 million undocumented people in this country today. And today, and this is part of the race to the bottom, because I met with some of these workers are being cheated and exploited as we speak right now. And the reason is, if you are undocumented, and I was just up in the Delano area yesterday, literally, if you're undocumented, what rights do you have? So I say I'm going to pay you X dollars an hour, and I don't. What are you going to do about it? You're going to go to the cops? You're going to go to the Department of Labor? You're not going to do that. So the employer is in the driver's seat and can do anything he wants with those undocumented workers. And then when you get people forced to work for very low wages, you come in and get a job. Why am I going to hire you at a decent wage when I can pay undocumented people slave wages? So in my view, for that and for many other reasons, we need to move toward comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. Now, let me just conclude on this. This is, my view, something I'm thinking about. If you think about history in America, and some of us are old enough to remember what was going on in this country 50 years ago. How do right-wing politicians succeed? You know how they succeed? It's the same old story, not just in this country, it's all over the world. You scapegoat people. You say, you got a problem? I know what the problem is. It's her. She's Asian. You got a problem? I know what the problem is. It's black. You got a problem? I know what the problem is. Bernie Sanders, he's Jewish. You scapegoat people and you blame people for all of the damn problems that exist in society. We have seen, I'll tell you this story. I want to tell you this story. Back in the 1950s, think about this, way back when, the lowest paid white workers in America were in Mississippi. They were the lowest paid white workers in America. They didn't earn anything. Now, you know how their employers got away with paying them starvation wages? They said, hey, you can drink from that water fountain. But the black guy can't. Aren't you a lucky guy? That's what you do. You divide people up. And that is exactly what the Trumps of the world are all about. All right? We understand that if they divide us up, we go nowhere in a hurry. If we stand together as black and white and Latino and Asian American and Native American, as gay and straight, male and women, female, if we stand together, then we have the guts to take on the big money interests. There is nothing we cannot accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm going to ask you to take your seat for a brief moment. Missing from this conversation is the indigenous population. Our brothers and sisters have left you a gift, a reminder, which is highly appropriate in this hallowed ground, in this sacred space. Some time ago, you gave a speech and you were visited by a little bird. As we were all waiting in line to be cleared of security, one gentleman by the name of Rafael Jesus Gonzalez presented to us a request that we present this to you. Presented to Bernie Sanders the Earth, Justice, Peace, Healers Badge in recognition of his commitment to the earth, to justice, to peace, and to democracy, presented on May 30th, 2016. It is a badge with a dove. And while it is referred to as a finch, it said, it is no little thing when speaking before thousands to be visited by a finch upon the podium. The trust of a creature so small, easily startled by the slightest gesture, must surely count for something big. I present this to you.
This is beautiful, Raphael. Thank you so much.
I want to thank Senator Bernie Sanders. We can say Bernie, but we can also say, we can do it. 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 Danny Glover, thank you so much. Thank you, my brother. Thank you. Jane Kim, thank you.